So I believe we've talked about the original route of US 66 through Monrovia. Entered Monrovia on Huntington Drive, made a right turn at Shamrock, and a left turn at Foothill Boulevard, and then went all the way through Monrovia, past the Aztec Hotel, into Arcadia. But in the early 1930s, the city of Arcadia successfully lobbied the State Department of Transportation, and ultimately, two Route 66s were established. One that followed the original route as outlined about 1926 or 27, and an alternate that continued west from Shamrock all the way through Arcadia, taking in the business district on Huntington Drive in Arcadia. We're going to imagine that we're driving on Route 66 through Monrovia, 1950. By that time, the original route had been abandoned. There was just the single Route 66 through Monrovia on Huntington Drive. We've stopped at the intersection of Huntington Drive and Myrtle Avenue, and we're looking around, and this is what we would see within our immediate purview. A Shell service station, what a shocker. On the north side of Huntington Drive, a place that in 1950 was known as the 111 Cafe. Later to become a drive-in, and still later to become Ben's Smoky Pit Barbecue. Ben's son occasionally comes back to Monrovia. Ben Oliver was his name, and his son occasionally comes back to visit. We have a used car sales lot. We have a brake shop. We have the Jolly Boys Green Gardens, which obviously was a market of some sort, and Carl Copper sold meats at that same location. And again, we had Branham's Auto Exchange, used cars. If you're beginning to get the impression that it was not a high-end corridor, you're right. It was a utilitarian corridor. Also in that first block, we had A.W. Fensky. Now later on, A.W. Fensky had a used furniture store at the corner of Colorado and Ivy in Monrovia. Fensky Brothers. My first venture into antique purchases occurred at Fensky's. The El Patio Motel was also in the 100 block. And then there were two residences left in that 100 block. E.J. Shower lived at the corner of Primrose, the northeast corner of Primrose and Huntington Drive. And on the southeast corner was Harry A. Burke. Harry Burke lived there the rest of his life. He probably died about 1968, 69, or 70. And it was that private residence from which old 177, the gas water heater from day and night that's now on the back porch of the Anderson house, came. When the house was being cleared out, preparation to its demolition, somebody spoke up and said, "How about that old water heater?" Circa 1917, and so it was preserved, and then it ended up on the Anderson house back porch. Beginning at Primrose, we had McDonald and O'Boyle Autos. This signified the beginning of the migration of auto dealerships from Foothill Boulevard in Monrovia down to Huntington Drive. McDonald and O'Boyle originally was in East Foothill, where the, near to where Tilford's was, at Ivy and Foothill later on, in a really interesting building, but they, more traffic was on Huntington, and so they moved their automobile dealership there. We had highway trailer sales. We had W.J. Dunlap at 202. Dunlap had an orange grove, and it was one of the last orange groves left on Huntington Drive. I remember Charlie Hageman, who worked for many years for the City of Monrovia Water Department, telling about turning on the water so that Dunlap could irrigate his orange grove. He still got a special rate. They didn't provide him with domestic water. They provided him with irrigation quality water that didn't have to have the same level of purity. And apparently there was a special valve somewhere in the city water system that allowed him to draw on that water to water his orange grove. We had another trailer sales. Real estate, Nelson Motors, again reflecting the move from Foothill to Huntington Drive, the Monrovia Blue Company, and Paul Douglas Woodworking Shop. Paul Douglas was a he did furniture refinishing. I have a table that was refinished by Paul Douglas about 1954. It could stand Mr. Douglas's treatment once again, but the original finish in places still looks pretty good. We get to, there was a restaurant called the QP. What do you suppose QP stood for? QP Burger Restaurant. Finally, Sia's Trailer Rental. And then at the corner of Magnolia and Huntington Drive, on the north side, Burton's Burger Bar. Say that 3 times rapidly. This might be the same Burton who later on had a little, what they called Burton's Hideaway on the south side of Library Park on West Lime. And finally at 248 southeast corner, Huntington Drive and Magnolia, was the Stop and Browse Pottery Company. Started out in 1940 as Betty by the Way Pottery. Later on, it was the Pottery Ranch, and was there until that was replaced by, guess what, a fast food place. Magnolia, starting at Magnolia, we have real estate, Plaza Arcade, an appliance place, Hoagland and Company, engineers, and then further down the block, the KC Liquor Store, Fox Sport Goods and Hardware. Then at 331, an address that stands out for several Monrovia families, was living Masato Sakatani. His wife, probably Yoshito, or maybe that was another male since the ending of O on the name, Mrs. Naga Ueda, and the Ueda Vegetable Market, home of Monrovia's Strawberry King, and Sakatanis were the next generation after the Uedas in that same location. Another gas station, and then finally at 349 at the corner of Huntington and Alta Vista, the Raleigh Incinerator Company. Now, you say incinerators? Sure, this was the era of backyard incinerators. When I was growing up, you accumulated your trash, you carried it out to the backyard, and you burned it in the incinerator. There was a pickup for garbage, but all other household materials that were waste, paper, etc., were burned in the incinerator. Not until 1957 were outdoor incinerators banned in the county of Los Angeles, because at that time they were a convenient scapegoat for smog. Were they the principal cause? Oh no, automobiles. But who wanted to name automobiles as the primary source of smog? So much easier to blame outdoor incinerators, ban them, and then have everybody send their stuff off to the landfill with its own consequences. Alta Vista, we had at 400 Rosedale Nurseries. Harry Rosedale established Rosedale Nurseries probably in the 1920s in Monrovia. Later on, the operation was moved to Azusa. Continued there under Harry Rosedale's leadership. Then finally his son or grandson, Miles Rosedale, took over. And that's the nursery that became Rosedale, a planned community in Azusa. When the nursery function was completely phased out, the land sold, and it was subdivided as a planned community. But started in Monrovia as Rosedale's Nurseries. Another Texaco service station, a motel, the Hub Motel, and then further down the block, a Richfield service station. At Mayflower, northwest corner, Hal's Auto Electric Service, and the Macmillan Oil Company. What is this, about 18 service stations at this point? Anyway, you were not going to run out of gas on Huntington Drive in Monrovia. At 502 on the south side was an upholstery store, currently the home of Mimi's. And at 503, the house that Jack built. It was a bar. More specifically, it was a dive. But anyway, it was a bar, little tiny thing, maybe 15 feet wide and maybe 25 or 30 feet deep. And it looked like a funny little, maybe simulated English cottage. It was just irregular in its construction. In other words, the house that Jack built looked like Jack had built it rather than a regular carpenter. So a couple years ago, somebody contacted me wanted to know about a Monrovia family, and I posed the question to Jerry Marug, who was Jan Marug's husband. Jerry and a group of other old-timers used to get together at the Monrovian for breakfast. And I asked Jerry if he remembered the particular family. Now I'm going to see if I can remember it. Merchant. One time mayor of Monrovia. And he said, well, yeah, I do remember him. He used to hang out at the house that Jack built. That was his favorite place to hang out. The reason that the question came up, I was contacted by a Midwesterner who was a Flash Gordon fan and knew that one of the stars in the Flash Gordon series, Priscilla Lawson Jones, had lived in Monrovia, had, I think, spent the rest of her life here after her movie career was over, and apparently she too used to frequent the house that Jack built because she lived not too far away. Anyway, the Merchant family was somehow involved in assisting her towards the end of her life, and that's why I asked him, and then he knew the name, didn't know anything about the family. So anyway, the house that Jack built has an interesting associations. Capital Cleaners, a couple residences, a chiropractor, Harry Unger. Now I need to ask Penny if that's her dad's family, because Penny's maiden name was Unger and her father is Jim Unger, so who knows? We have a repair shop owned by Emmanuel Gangaware. I remember Jean, his daughter, in high school. Another real estate office, another restaurant, another auto electric repair service, and then the 20th Century Floor Service and a realty company. Then talk about anonymity, the Doe Motel at 540. Another motel, then the Twin City Market. Highway L'Esplanade, we have Canine Campus Dogs, a bedding company, an upholstery shop, and a barber. We also have Powder Puff Studio Beauty Shop, and what else? A rental service. A little further at Alamitas, some residences left, a restaurant called The Homestead, and my personal favorite at 660 West Huntington Drive, Foster's Old Fashioned Freeze. Do you remember Foster's?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. So we had friends in Monrovia, Shugart, Charlie and Mickey Shugart. Charlie bought a used World War II Army Jeep, and we used to drive around. The two families used to pile into that thing and drive around town. One of our destinations was Foster's Old Fashioned Freeze, and my favorite was a butterscotch sundae. If you'd ever had a butterscotch sundae from Foster's, you would never forget it. I went with a friend to Randsburg last Saturday. We stopped at the Randsburg General Store. I treated myself to an ice cream sundae. They had butterscotch on the menu. I ordered it. Big disappointment. Nothing like Foster's. I don't know if the recipe is available, but anyway, that was a big treat, Foster's. We have a service station again, and then the famous Budget Town Market, which had groceries, it had liquor stores. I can remember there loading up with contraband for a party from for the Citrus Chamber Singers. Motel, restaurant, G.A. Pettingill. I mentioned that name only because George was married to Jeanette Tiny, who stood about 4'9", and George and Tiny were longtime members of St. Luke's. We have a confectionery, a pet supply, another motel, furniture, antique shop, a typesetting service. We get to Los Robles. We have the Plantation. I think that Robert DiDio has a postcard featuring the Plantation restaurant. I don't know what it looked like. I think the exterior had some architectural details that were supposed to suggest a southern plantation. I'll ask Robert. Another motel, another cafe, trailer park, another restaurant. We get to Encino Avenue, one remaining residence, that of E.E. West, who was a teacher on the faculty of Monrovia High School for many years. We have the Monarch Hotel because we're very close to the Monrovia-Arcadia border. We have Oak Park Gardens. We have L.E. Wallace, Luther E. Wallace, who's come up in conversation. I believe Lee Shamadan found something that he had done or been instrumental with. We have self-service laundry. Finally, right on the border, 951, we have Bissell's Delicious Donuts. Do I remember the donut shop? Oh yes. Favorite destination. So we're right at Huntington Drive, at 5th Avenue in Huntington. Route 66 transitions into Arcadia.
And what are you looking at, Steve?
I'm looking at the street address, the street and street address index from the 1950 Monrovia City Directory.
Can you hold it up so we can see
Sure,
the
I'm
front?
happy to. This is the pink section.
See the outside. Okay.
Here's the directory itself, featuring the Monrovia Mutual Building and Loan, W.B. Temple Mortuary, Carrie E. Hardy, Chrysler Plymouth Dealer, George Alval Realtor,
Can you
Live Oak Cemetery.
turn it
And
around so we can see
These are
that?
the advertisers on the cover. There were
Gotcha.
advertisers on the inside. There was an advertising, a classified section, and then each page had an ad for a particular business that had subscribed. For example, the one I'm looking at is for Borrego Plumbing and Heating. Bob Borrego was a longtime Monrovian. He had his plumbing and heating was on this 1200 block of South Myrtle Avenue. Here's a bank advertisement. Southern Commercial and Savings Bank, later First Western Bank. Then what happened? It was gobbled up by a larger statewide bank, Arcadia Motors. So anyway, the pink section was the one that contained streets in alphabetical order, and then addresses beginning with the lowest to the higher numbers.
So that's a walk down.
That's a drive west on Route 66 from Myrtle. West. Now we're going to go east. We are, if I can find it. Okay. Right at the corner, another gas station associated. An automotive store, Johnny's Drive-In Restaurant. Another cafe, real estate, and then another nursery. Dygard Nurseries, very big nursery operation. They also had a growing ground, I believe, on Duarte Road, but they specialized, I think, in things like camellias and so forth. Anyway, Dygard Nurseries was a Monrovia destination and landmark for many years. Grocery store. Another familiar name, that of Shigeru Morimoto, who lived behind 138 East Huntington Drive. At one point, he had the grocery store at 138. By that time, apparently he'd sold it, and it was then known as the Ranch Market, but originated by the Morimoto family. At 150, we have the Monrovia Monumental Works. They did grave markers. They did gravestones, grave monuments, and the proprietor also, because he probably didn't sell a whole lot of grave markers, had a gas station, Pietro Canale. In the Anderson House is a mock-up of the profile of William Monroe that Pietro Canale used to carve the Monroe Memorial Stone in Library Park in Monrovia. He did the oval profile first, cast it in plaster of Paris, and then used that to carve the stone itself in Library Park. So I can remember it as a youngster. He had little enclosed areas with a couple gravestone samples for people to look at and say, yeah, I think that's how we will remember Papa. We'll get one of those. Anyway, that was the Canale family, longtime remembers. Best Built Fence Company, an industrial hospital, Cleaners and Tailors, the Bradson Motel, which lasted for a long, long time. Another realty store, another Japanese American, Yasaki Kondo. Plumber, Maxwell Industries, Gibney Auto Sales, and then at 239, the East Side Community Center adjacent to Shiloh AME Zion Church. We have the Reliable Pest Control, electrical contractors, and then at Canyon, 266, we have, not on Canyon, but at Canyon, we have on the south side, Smart and Final. which was at that location for a long time, only recently moved to DeWarty. And then at 280, Christie Freeze Ice Cream. They didn't cut it when it came to Foster's Old Fashioned Freeze. California, 506, was Ida Snowden. Ida was one of the daughters of Duncan Shaw, who came from South Carolina in 1886. We have La Alteña Tortilleria, unique beauty shop. We have Rose's Beauty Shop, a barber, a poultry market, a lawnmower shop, another at 510, another Japanese American, E.T. Kitamura. At 514, we have Enoch Spicer, probably an ancestor of our current city councilman and Mayor Pro Tem Larry Spicer. We have a cleaning shop, OK Rubber Welders, Jack Mix Real Estate. Jack Mix was a longtime prominent member of the African American community in Monrovia who had a real estate shop at 529. We had the Liberty Bell Market. And at 536, we had the Old Fashioned Barbecue, and then Dandridge's Real Estate. Beginning at Sherman Avenue, that once did come all the way through to Huntington, now stops at Cherry. We have the Airport Liquor Store, named from the nearby Monrovia Airport.
Is that the liquor store that everybody talks about hanging out at? That was kind of a renowned.
It was. Renowned or infamous,
Yeah.
depending on your viewpoint. But yes, Airport Liquor Store, Auto Top Shop, and then at 624, Bunn Brothers Gas Station. Later on, that gas station was at the corner of Huntington and California, but at this point, it was at 624 East Huntington. We have at Shamrock on the northeast corner of Shamrock and Huntington Drive, P.L. Davis Texaco Station, Paul Davis, born in Monrovia about 1915. His daughter Lynn Davis later was able to buy the Upton Sinclair house and just made it very, very attractive. Her father's birthplace, Paul's birthplace, is up the street from you, Sandy, on Alta Vista on the west side. Recently, after many, many years, received a new roof and some paint. I said, Lynn, have you ever thought about your father's birthplace? And she smiled and she said, I can only save one house at a time. Paul Davis, tragically killed in a well accident. There was something went awry with an oil well derrick, and Paul was thrown from the tower and died from the impact injuries. Monrovia Motor Lodge, Cabinet Shop, the New Salem Motor Court, Sunnyland Fruit Products, another great land at 802, my old Kentucky home. It was done in the style of a log cabin. They served authentic Southern food. That's where I had my first corn fritter. It was also where, in 1962, or thereabouts, I went for a family outing and got some information from a distant shirt tail and about early family events. So that stands out in my memory anyway. A trailer park, another motel, and then at Mountain Avenue, Motel 66, and the Oak Park Motel that survives to the present time on the north side, east of Mountain. Another restaurant, another motel, and finally at 1127, right at the city limits, B.W. Adams. Might be part of the Adams family, I'm not sure. So that takes us from the boundary between DeWarty and Monrovia all the way west to Huntington Drive. And it'll give you some idea of what Huntington Drive looked like. Lots of restaurants, lots of motels, lots of service stations, what else? Real estate offices, etc. So it was designed to provide a variety of services for people coming through Monrovia on their way west, with the idea that they would snag some of the business, just as earlier when the McDonald brothers had the airport, the airdrome on the south side and the big orange on the north side. They figured they could capture passersby going both east and west on Route 66.